Students, this lecture is for class Shastri Part 3rd, paper 1st. Today we will study of the famous poet Robert Browning's poem My Last Duchess. First of all, we will know about Robert Browning. Here is the picture of Robert Browning. Robert Browning was born at Camberwell in 1812. He was 3 years younger to Tennyson. He belongs to the Victorian age. He was conferred an honorary degree of MA by Oxford University. The chief characteristics of his style are dramatic turn of expression, a remarkable fluency of verse, and a certain rapidity of thought. Browning's love for poetry is the finest in the world because it doesn't talk about raptures and ideals and gates of heaven, but about window panes and gloves and garden walls. It does not deal with abstraction. In his love poems, he expresses the immortal moment when one forgets the past and the future in love for one's beloved. When Browning died in 1889, he was regarded as a sage and philosopher poet who, through his writing, had made contributions to Victorian social and political discourse. Usually, for a poet, societies for the study of his work formed while he was still alive. Such Browning's societies remained common in Britain and the United States until the early 20th century. Then we come on about the poem. My Last Duchess is a dramatic monologue written by Victorian poet Robert Browning in 1842. In the poem, the Duke of Ferrara uses a painting of his former wife as a conversation piece. The Duke speaks about his former wife's perceived inadequacies to a representative of the family of his bride to be, revealing his obsession with controlling others in the process. Browning uses the compelling psychological portrait of a despicable character to critique the objectification of women and abuses of power. Robert Browning published My Last Duchess in 1842 in a book of poems titled Dramatic Lyrics. As the title suggests, in these poems, Browning experiments with form, combining some aspect of stage, plays, and some aspects of romantic verse to create a new type of poetry for its own Victorian age. The Victorians are the poor unfortunates who come between the romantics and the modernists. In other words, authors in this period got sandwiched between two great movements that majorly influenced Western culture, and so readers sometimes forget about the Victorian age writers. Browning's inspiration for My Last Duchess was the history of the Renaissance Duke Alfonso II of Ferrara, whose young wife Lucrezia died in suspicious circumstances in 1561. Lucrezia was a Medici, part of a family that was becoming one of the most powerful and wealthy in Europe at the time. During Lucrezia's lifetime, however, the Medici were just beginning to build their power base and were still considered upstarts by the other nobility. Lucrezia himself never got to enjoy riches and status. She was married at 14 and dead by 17. After her death, Alfonso courted and eventually married the niece of the Count of Tyrol. Robert Browning takes this brief anecdote out of the history books and turns it into an opportunity for readers to peek inside the head of a psychopath. Although Browning hints at the real life Renaissance backstory by putting the word Ferrara under the title of the poem as an epigraph, he removes the situation from most of its historical details. It's important to notice that the Duke, his previous wife, and the woman he is courting aren't named in the poem at all. Even though there were historical events that inspired the poem, the text itself has a more generalized, universal, nameless feel. Then we come on the poem. Paraphrase. Line number 1 to 15. That is my last Duchess, painted on the wall, looking as if she were alive, I call. That piece a wonder now, Fra Pandolf's hand worked busily a day, and there she stands. Will please you sit and look at her, I said. Fra Pandolf by design for never read strangers like you that pictured countenance, the depth and passion of its earnest glance. But to myself they turned, since none puts by the curtain I have drawn for you but I, and seemed as they would ask me, if they durst, how such a glance came there. So not the first are you to turn and ask thus, sir, it was not her husband's presence only called that spot of joy into the Duchess' cheek, perhaps. My last Duchess opens up with the speaker asking a listener if he would please sit down and look at a portrait of his last Duchess. This makes the readers wonder why this Duchess is no longer his present Duchess. He does not reveal whether she is deceased or put away in a convent somewhere. He asks his listener to sit and look at the life-sized painting of her. He reveals that this painting is behind this, gives a little bit of insight into why he was the only one who was allowed to open the curtain. All along he wanted to be the only one who would bring a look of joy to his Duchess' face. Now that she was put away somewhere and her life-size painting was on the wall, he could be the only one to ever see of that look of joy on a curtain, and that no one but he is allowed to draw the curtain, to view the painting, or to show it to anyone. This is very suspicious behavior. The reader can immediately sense that the Duke is controlling. The question that still remains unanswered is, why is this his last Duchess? The Duke describes the look on the Duchess' face, and that she had a joyous look and earnest glance. He notes that it was not her husband's presence only called that spot of joy into the Duchess' cheek. This is a curious thing to say. Why would he expect that his presence alone? and nothing else would bring joy to her face. He does not answer that question, but the fact that he nods her face because he would allow no one else to look at the painting without his permission. Suddenly, our speaker seems somewhat psychotic. Line number 16 to 24. Fra Pandolf chanced to say, her mental lapse over my lady's wrist too much, or paint must never hope to reproduce the faint half flush that dies along her throat. Such stuff was courtesy, she thought, and coach enough. For calling up that spot of joy, she had a heart, how shall I say, too soon made glad, too easily impressed. She liked whatever she looked on, and her looks went everywhere. In this section of my last duchess, the Duke seems to be remembering his former duchess and all that bothered him about her. It would seem that she was too easily pleased by everyone around her. The Duke was not happy with this. He didn't like that if someone like Fra Pandolf, we don't know much more about this character, were to tell her that her shawl covered her wrist too much, she would blush. The Duke did not like that she would blush at the flirtation of another man. He did not like that the things which he called common courtesy would call up that spot of joy which she seemed to always have on her face. The Duke accused her of having a heart that was too soon made glad and too easily impressed. He was annoyed that she liked everything that she looked at. This man seems more and more psychotic and controlling as my last duchess goes on. It would seem that he put away his duchess because he could not control her feelings. He wanted to be the only one to bring her joy and make her blush. Then we come on line number 25 to 35. Sir, it was all one, my favorite favor at her breast, the dropping of the daylight in the west, the bow of cherries some officious fool broke in the orchard for her, the white mule she rode with round the terrace, all and each would draw from her alike the approving speech, or blush. At least she thanked men good, but thanked somehow, I know not how, as if she ranked my gift of a 900 years old name with anybody's gift who would stoop to blame this sort of trifling. In these lines of my last duchess, the Duke continues to explain all of the flaws in the duchess character. He says that she values her white mule, a branch of cherries, and a sunset as much as she values a piece of jewelry that he had given her. He is irritated that she does not seem to see the value in what he gives to her, or that she seems to value the simple pleasures of life as much as she values his expensive gifts to her. He also seems irritated that she does not seem to understand the importance of his place in life. By marrying her, he had given her a 900 years old name. This reveals that his family had been around for a very long time, and thus he gave her a well known and prestigious name in marrying her. She did not seem to be any more thankful for this than she was thankful to watch the sunset. This Irritated the Duke so much that was not even willing to stoop to her level to discuss it with her. He thinks it would be trifling to do so. Then we come on line number 36 to 46. Even had you skill in speech which I have not, to make your will quite clear to such an one, and say, just this or that in you disgust me, here you miss. Oh, there exceed the mark, and if she let herself be lessened so nor plainly said, her wits to yours, forsooth and made excuse. Even then would be some stooping, and I choose never to stoop. Oh, sir, she smiled no doubt, whenever I passed her, but who passed without much the same smile. This grew, I gave commands, then all smiles stopped together. There she stands, as if alive. Will it please you rise? We will meet. The Duke continues to explain that he chooses never to stoop to discuss with his Duchess what made him so disgusted with her. Yet he seems quite comfortable discussing it with this listener. Perhaps he thought himself too high and mightily to stoop to talk to a woman, even if that woman was his wife. He admitted that she smiled at him pleasantly when he passed by, but it bothered him that everyone received that same smile from her. He explained that he gave commands and then all smiles stopped together. This causes the reader to feel sorry for the Duchess, and rightly so. She was a lovely, happy, smiling person. It seems that the Duke commanded her in such a way as to make her stop smiling altogether. He robbed her of her joy with his controlling attitude toward her. After explaining what happened when he commanded her, the Duke turns his attention back to the painting on the wall and says, there she stands as if alive. This suggests that the real Duchess is no longer alive. The Duke seems happier with a painting of her because he can control who gets to look at the joy in her face. The Duke then invites his listener to return downstairs with him. Then we come on line number 47 to 56. The company below then, I repeat, the Count your master's known munificence is ample warrant that no just pretense of mine for dowry will be disallowed, though his fair daughter's self as I owe. At starting is my object, nay, we will go together down, sir. Notice Neptune, though taming a seahorse, thought a rarity which Claus of Innsbruck cast in bronze for me. This section of my last Duchess reveals the identity of the Duke's listener. He is the servant of a count in the land, and they are trying to arrange a marriage between the Duke and the Count's daughter. The Duke says that his fair daughter is his object. He brings the man back downstairs with him, and as they walk, he points out bronze statue that was made especially for him. The statue is of Neptune taming a seahorse. Neptune, of course, is the god of the sea. This symbolizes the Duke, and the seahorse symbolizes any Duchess he would acquire. The Duke views himself as a god, and he wishes to tame his wife to do whatever he wishes her to do, and even to feel whatever he wishes her to feel. This man is clearly demented and controlling, and the speaker in My Last Duchess reveals Browning's ideas of his fellow men. Then we come on dramatic monologue. There is the poetry in which the poet goes down into himself and finds his inspiration and his subject in this experience, thoughts, and feelings. We may call this personal or subjective poetry. Then there is the poetry in which the poet goes out of himself, mingles with the actions and passion of the world without, and deals with, he discovers with his own individuality. We may call this impersonal or objective poetry. Such impersonal poetry falls naturally into two groups, the narrative and the dramatic. Dramatic poetry. The dramatic poetry, though intended not for the stage but to be read, is essentially dramatic in principle. The dramatic monologue is one of the most popular kinds of dramatic poetry. Monologue. Monologue is a speech presented by a single character, most often to express these mental thoughts aloud, though sometimes also to directly another character or the audience. There are so many characters in a monologue, but there is a single speaker and all other characters are silent listeners. Monologue is a character study. Monologues are common across the range, dramatic as well as non-dramatic, such as poetry. So we come on the conclusion that the poem My Last Duchess is a famous dramatic monologue which was written by Robert Browning. Thanks.